I had just returned from my 15-minute coffee break when I noticed something strange. Two people in dark suits were standing at my cubicle. Both wore ID badges clipped neatly to their belts, and each carried a slim folder. One of them was wearing latex gloves, flipping through my drawers as if I were some sort of criminal. The other was photographing my computer screen, moving slowly, methodically. My heart didn't race. It just dropped into my stomach. I knew instantly what this was. I walked closer, clutching my coffee cup, trying to keep my face neutral. "Is there a problem?" I asked. The taller officer straightened. "Jessica Alvarez?" I nodded. "We're conducting a compliance inspection," he said, in that rehearsed tone people use when they've said the same line 100 times before. "Based on an anonymous report." Anonymous. Sure. I didn't need anyone to tell me who had filed that report. Just 2 cubicles away, pretending to be buried in spreadsheets, was Chloe Sanders, my boss's only daughter. The same Chloe who'd started at the company 3 months ago. The same Chloe who made it painfully obvious that she thought my position should have been hers. I looked back at the officers and forced a calm smile. "Go ahead," I said, setting my coffee down. "You won't find anything." But even as I said it, my hands trembled slightly. Not because I was guilty, because I knew exactly how far Chloe had been willing to go. Chloe and I had never gotten along. From her very first day, she treated the office like it was her kingdom, and the rest of us were peasants. She interrupted meetings to clarify points I'd already explained, usually getting them wrong. She would drop her father's name casually, reminding everyone who really held the power. And me? I was the person standing between her and a promotion she believed she deserved. I'd been here for 6 years. I knew the clients, the regulations, the systems. My work wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Which is exactly why she hated me. Because you can't outshine someone who doesn't need to shine in the first place. The officers kept working in silence. They opened file folders, flipped through reports, checked my desktop. Every now and then, they exchanged glances. That wordless kind of communication that makes everyone around them nervous. I crossed my arms and stayed quiet. Inside, though, my thoughts were racing. This is it. She's finally done it. Chloe's managed to convince them I'm a liability. Months of whispers, fake concern, accidental mistakes pinned on me. She's been building this moment. I stole a glance in her direction. She was pretending to highlight cells on a spreadsheet, but her eyes kept flicking up, watching. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I should have been angry. I should have felt humiliated, standing there while strangers rifled through my things. But instead, I felt something different. A strange kind of calm. Because Chloe had no idea what she was about to walk into. Before I tell you what happened next, could you take a quick second to drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the bell, because this story only gets wilder from here. The shorter officer pulled open my bottom drawer. He sifted past notebooks, pens, and a few personal items. Then his gloved hand froze. He pulled out a leather-bound folder, flipped it open, and frowned. "Jessica," he said slowly. "What's this?" I glanced down at the file in his hands. My chest tightened. It wasn't mine. At least, it hadn't been yesterday. Inside were printed emails, notes scribbled in handwriting that wasn't mine, even screenshots of supposed mistakes. Mistakes that looked suspiciously like the ones Chloe had whispered about in the past weeks. I felt my throat go dry, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. "That's not my file," I said. The taller officer's eyebrows lifted. "It was in your drawer." I looked straight at him. "And yet it doesn't belong to me." Behind me, I heard the faintest sound, the squeak of Chloe's chair as she shifted, trying to see. For a moment, the break room chatter, the ringing phones, the tapping keyboards around me all seemed to fade. It was just me, the officers, and the folder that could ruin my career. But then something happened that shifted everything. The officer kept flipping through the pages, his expression darkening. He showed a page to his partner. They whispered quickly, then glanced at me with an unreadable look. "Miss Alvarez," the shorter one said finally, "we need to speak with you in private." I nodded, steady as stone. Of course. Because if they looked closely enough, they'd see the truth. And when they did, Chloe's plan would collapse before her eyes. The compliance officers led me down the hall to one of the small, glass-walled conference rooms. My coworkers' eyes followed me as we walked past, whispering behind hands, pretending to look busy. I could practically hear the story spreading. Jessica's under investigation. Compliance caught her red-handed. Inside the room, they closed the blinds, sat across from me, and placed the folder on the table like it was evidence in a trial. The taller officer cleared his throat. "Jessica, as part of this inspection, we're obligated to review any documents found at your workstation. Can you explain the origin of this file?" I leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to stay calm. "I've never seen that folder before today." He raised an eyebrow. "It was found in your desk drawer." "I believe you," I said evenly, "but that doesn't make it mine." The shorter officer flipped open the folder. These appear to be records of errors, policy violations, and misconduct. The notes are dated, signed with initials, and include supporting documents. For example, he pulled out a page. An email to a client where you allegedly provided incorrect policy terms. I felt my stomach tighten. I remembered that email. Except, I had caught the mistake before it went out. I'd rewritten it and resent it within 10 minutes. The incorrect version had never left my drafts. I looked the officer straight in the eye. "That's not the final email. That's a screenshot of an unsent draft." The two men exchanged a look. For weeks, I'd sensed Chloe circling. The accidental bumps into my desk when she passed by. The casual remarks she made about my bad memory in meetings. The way she'd hover whenever I was typing, like she was waiting for me to slip. And now, here it was. Her big move. A fabricated dossier of my supposed incompetence. Except Chloe had made one mistake. She thought I didn't know how closely she'd been watching me. But I had been watching her too. The officers asked me to walk them through the documents, page by page. There were screenshots of spreadsheets with errors circled in red. But the version in the folder wasn't the final version. The corrected file was still sitting on the company's shared drive with my digital signature and timestamp. There were printouts of emails with typos or wrong dates, but every one of those had a follow-up correction, also timestamped, also logged. And then there were handwritten notes, pages and pages of them. They described me as habitually late, unprofessional in tone, and potentially reckless with client data. The handwriting was neat, feminine, loopy, like a teenager's journal. Not mine. I pointed to the notes. "Do you have handwriting samples on file?" The taller officer gave me a measured look. "Why?" "Because anyone who's worked here longer than a week knows I print in block capitals. Always. It's in my HR file. That's not my writing." He scribbled a note to himself. After nearly an hour, they leaned back in their chairs. The shorter officer tapped the folder. "Jessica, do you have any idea who might want to create this kind of documentation about you?" I hesitated, just long enough to make it look like I was reluctant. Then I sighed. "I don't want to make accusations without proof, but Chloe Sanders has expressed interest in my position. She also has access to my desk. Everyone does. The drawers don't lock." They didn't respond right away, but I could tell by the way they exchanged glances that the name wasn't unfamiliar. Back at my cubicle, Chloe was waiting. She wasn't looking at me directly, but I could feel the smug satisfaction radiating off her. She was certain she'd won. I sat down, turned on my monitor, and acted like nothing had happened. Inside, though, I was thinking 3 steps ahead, because Chloe had underestimated me. She thought I was the type who'd panic, deny, maybe even lash out. But the truth was, I'd been documenting things too. Not fake mistakes, not fabricated notes, but subtle details, real events, the kind of things people overlook until it's too late. The officers might not know it yet, but they were sitting on the edge of something much bigger than a few forged emails. That evening, as I packed up to leave, Chloe passed by my desk. She stopped, leaned against the partition, and whispered so no one else could hear. "Rough day, Jessica?" I looked up slowly. "Not as rough as yours will be." Her smile faltered for half a second, but she quickly recovered. "You'll see. People always find out who's really pulling the strings." "Yeah," I said softly. "They do." When I got home, I opened my laptop and reviewed my own records. I hadn't planned it this way, but over the past year, I'd built an archive. Not of mistakes, but of conversations, client feedback, performance reviews, and casual notes that painted a very different picture than the one Chloe was trying to sell. And tucked among those files was something I hadn't needed until now. Proof of Chloe's meddling. Because 3 weeks earlier, I'd caught her in my inbox. She'd accidentally sent a client draft under my name, riddled with errors. But the IT logs had captured her login session. I'd saved the screenshot. Quietly. Just in case. And now, just in case had arrived. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. Tomorrow, the officers would come back with more questions. They always did. And when they asked, I'd be ready. Because Chloe thought she was building a case against me. But what she didn't realize was that she'd been writing her own indictment the whole time. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. The office was still quiet, only the hum of computers and the faint smell of burnt coffee from yesterday's pot. I wanted time to breathe before the storm hit, but I didn't have long. At 9:12 sharp, the compliance officers returned. They stopped at my cubicle first. "Jessica, do you have a moment?" My coworkers looked up, curious. Some exchanged glances. Others kept their eyes down, pretending not to notice. I grabbed my notepad and followed the officers back to the same glass conference room as yesterday. This time, there was another person waiting inside. Mr. Harrison, our department manager. His jaw was tight, his hands folded on the table. He looked like he hadn't slept. The taller officer began, "Jessica, thank you for your cooperation yesterday. We've been reviewing the documentation. Some things don't quite add up. We'd like to clarify a few details." He slid a page across the table. The email screenshot Chloe had planted. "We checked the client records," the shorter officer said. "As you mentioned, the draft was never sent. The final version was clean. However, this printout clearly came from within the system." "Correct," I said, "but it wasn't taken by me." Mr. Harrison leaned forward. "Do you have proof of that?" I opened my notepad, flipped to the page where I'd written dates and times, and slid it back across the table. IT logs, 3 weeks ago. Someone accessed my account from a workstation that wasn't mine. I flagged it and took screenshots before reporting it to support. The officers studied the page. Mr. Harrison frowned. "Who?" I didn't answer right away. My pen tapped lightly against the table. "You'll see the username in the log," I said finally. It wasn't mine. I didn't have to say the name. They'd see it soon enough. Back at my desk, the atmosphere felt different. Conversations quieted when I walked past. People avoided eye contact. By noon, I understood why. "Jessica," my coworker Maria whispered when she caught me in the hallway. "I need to tell you something. Chloe's been talking." I stiffened. "Talking about what?" "She's saying you're under investigation for client mishandling, that you've been falsifying records to cover mistakes. She says compliance is close to proving it." I closed my eyes briefly. Chloe wasn't just relying on the planted folder. She was poisoning the well, creating doubt before the truth could surface. "Do people believe her?" I asked. Maria hesitated. "Some do. You know how she is. She makes it sound convincing." Of course she did. Chloe had inherited her father's charisma. The same sharp smile, the same ability to twist a story into something believable. And unlike me, she didn't care who she stepped on in the process. That afternoon, I noticed small changes. Emails from colleagues were shorter, clipped. The friendly banter in the break room quieted when I walked in. Even the receptionist, who always greeted me warmly, only offered a polite nod. Chloe's poison was spreading. But I reminded myself, perception isn't reality. The officers weren't fools. They had the logs. They had the handwriting samples. It was only a matter of time before the pieces came together. Still, that didn't make the waiting any easier. At 3:45, the compliance officers returned. This time, they didn't ask me to leave my desk. They asked Chloe. Her face went pale, but she smiled tightly and followed them into the conference room. The entire office pretended not to watch, but everyone did. Heads tilted, fingers paused above keyboards. Even Mr. Harrison stood outside his office, arms crossed, eyes following her. Through the blinds, I caught glimpses. Chloe gesturing with her hands, talking fast. One officer scribbling notes while the other kept his gaze locked on her. Her confidence slipping with every minute. 30 minutes passed. 40. At 50 minutes, the door opened. Chloe walked out, eyes red, jaw clenched. She didn't look at anyone as she marched back to her desk. The officers didn't say a word. They went straight to Mr. Harrison's office instead. For the rest of the day, Chloe barely moved. She typed furiously, but her hands shook on the keyboard. Every so often, she glanced my way, her expression somewhere between anger and panic. And I realized something important. She still thought she could win. She thought this was just a setback. That if she pushed harder, whispered louder, she could still convince everyone I was the villain. But the more she tried, the clearer the contrast became. Her noise versus my silence. Her rumors versus my record. Her chaos versus my calm. As I packed my bag that evening, Mr. Harrison stopped by my desk. He lowered his voice. "Jessica, keep doing your job. Don't engage. Understood?" I nodded, but inside I knew it wasn't enough to just survive this. Chloe had crossed a line. She hadn't just tried to take my job. She'd tried to take my name, my reputation, everything I'd built in 6 years. And if she thought I was going to let that slide, she didn't know me at all. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I organized the files I'd saved. AT logs, client testimonials, performance reviews, even casual emails where Chloe had overstepped. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was preparing to expose her. By 8:31, the calendar invite hit my inbox. Compliance review. Attendance required. Location. Conference room. B. Attendees. The 2 officers. Ms. Patel from HR. Mr. Harrison, my manager. Optional. Chloe Sanders. Optional, right. I printed nothing, brought only a notepad, and walked in exactly on time. The blinds were half closed. The table was too clean. Everyone had that stiff posture people get when they've decided not to make small talk. The taller officer started. "Jessica, thanks for coming. We've reviewed the documents found at your workstation and compared them to system records." His tone was neutral, but his jaw worked like he was chewing on a problem he didn't like. Ms. Patel nodded. "We'll walk through key points and then take questions." I folded my hands and waited. The shorter officer slid a page toward me. First, the email error that appeared in the folder. Server logs confirm your draft wasn't sent. The sent item in the client thread matches your corrected version. He tapped the margin. "This is fine." He placed a second page on top of the first. Second, access logs. At 5:46 p.m., 3 weeks ago, your account was opened from Workstation 4C while you were badged out of the building at 5:28 p.m. Mr. Harrison looked at me. "You were off-site?" "Yes," I said. "Jim, the badge log will show I didn't return." Ms. Patel glanced at the taller officer. He slid over a printed table. "Security confirmed the badge. We also pulled camera stills from 5:44 to 5:49 p.m. He turned the page around so I could see. The grainy frame showed my row of cubicles, a figure in a camel coat. Head down, hands in my drawer. Even in low resolution, the profile was unmistakable. Chloe's eyes flicked to the photo and away again. "That's not..." You can't tell who that is. The shorter officer didn't argue. He placed a new sheet on the stack. Third, print server logs. The hard copies in the folder were produced on Konica Minolta 2E at 6:02 p.m. same day. Job owner, C. Sanders. Silence swallowed the room. Even the air vent sounded loud. Chloe let out a breathy laugh. We all print under shared queues. Anyone could. It wasn't a shared queue. The taller officer said quietly. It required network login. The job metadata includes the user hash. He looked at her, then at Ms. Patel. We verified it with IT. Mr. Harrison sat back. His face went a shade paler. Where was Mr. Sanders looped in on this? He asked, voice careful. He's Chloe's father and her skip level. Ms. Patel's expression didn't move. He was copied on the initial anonymous complaint. He has been recused as of this morning. That should have happened at the outset. She didn't look at Chloe when she said it. She didn't need to. I kept breathing. Steady in, steady out. I could feel the weight shifting in the room like a table finally settling on 4 legs. The shorter officer continued. We also compared the handwritten notes in the folder to samples from personnel files. They don't match yours. They do, however, match a training form initialed by Ms. Sanders during onboarding. The slant, the looped G's, the open A's. I was documenting concerns. Chloe cut in, voice sharp. Whistleblowing is encouraged here, right? Or do we punish people for caring about standards? Ms. Patel folded her hands. Whistleblowing is protected. Fabrication is not. Chloe's jaw twitched. I didn't fabricate anything. She's sloppy. Everyone knows it. Mr. Harrison looked at me, then back at Chloe. We don't know that. I opened my notepad and slid a single-color printout toward the officers. There's one more thing. My voice surprised me with how calm it sounded. 3 weeks ago, there was a client draft sent under my name with multiple errors. I caught it and resubmitted. IT traced the origination to CSANDERS on workstation 5B during my lunch hour. I reported it to support but asked them not to escalate unless it became a pattern. The taller officer scanned the printout, then pulled a second copy from his folder like he'd already been there. We have this. Thank you, Chloe gripped the edge of the table. You can't prove intent. People ask to help all the time. I was helping. Jessica leaves things half done. Intent is precisely what we're establishing, Ms. Patel said, still calm. We're also establishing process failures, including the lack of early recusal for your father. Chloe's head snapped toward her. He did nothing wrong. Ms. Patel didn't blink. That's why it's called a recusal, to protect all parties. The taller officer pushed the planted folder away like it was something that might spill. Jessica, do you have anything else you want to add? I thought about all of it. The quiet corrections, the clipped emails, the way conversations died when I walked into the break room. I thought about the coworkers who didn't look up, and Maria whispering, she makes it sound convincing. I want to keep doing my job, I said. I want my name to mean the same thing it meant last month. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Ms. Patel closed her notebook. Here's what happens next. Jessica, you'll return to your full duties. We'll remove any flags or holds on your accounts. Chloe, you are placed on administrative leave with pay effective immediately while we complete our review. You are not to access company systems or premises without HR approval. Chloe's mouth fell open. You're suspending me? Based on a printer log? Based on a fuzzy photo? We're suspending you based on a pattern, Ms. Patel said. The documents, the access logs, the timing, and the conflict of interest concerns. We need to do this properly. Chloe turned to Mr. Harrison like he might pull a lever and change the floor under my chair. Say something. He looked tired, older. Compliance is running this. I'm staying out of it, like I should have from the start. The shorter officer gathered the papers. He paused, then looked up at me. We'll likely ask more questions, but the core issues are clear. As we stood, the taller officer added almost gently, For what it's worth, we don't like being used. When we realized the print jobs were tied to a complainant's account, well, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Their faces went pale when they discovered what they were carrying was someone else's weapon. I stepped into the hallway and let the hum of the office swallow me. Keyboards, phones, the far-off clatter of the mail cart. Maria was near the copier. Our eyes met. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, slow, like we were finally standing on the same piece of ground again. At my desk, my monitor woke to the client dashboard. No red banners, no holds. The ordinary grid of names and renewal dates looked almost beautiful. A minute later, security appeared at Chloe's cubicle with Ms. Patel. They spoke quietly. Chloe handed over her badge and laptop, movements jerky, like she couldn't quite believe the physics of what was happening. She didn't look at me. She walked out without drama, just a tight line where her mouth should be. The office didn't cheer. No one clapped. That isn't how real life works. People stared at their screens and typed and pretended not to notice what they were noticing. I took a breath and opened the next client file. This wasn't over. Administrative leave wasn't a verdict. Policies take time. Processes have to be followed. Endings aren't clean lines on a calendar invite. But for the first time in weeks, I felt the table steady under my hands. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Internal extension. Jessica? The voice was firm, unfamiliar. This is Elaine Mercer, Director of Compliance. I'd like to meet with you privately this afternoon. There's something you should see. It concerns Mr. Sanders. I stared at the receiver, the cursor blinking on my screen. Of course there was more. Send the invite, I said. I'll be there. At 3 p.m. sharp, I walked into the 12th floor conference room. The skyline stretched behind the glass like a backdrop, the city buzzing far below. Inside sat Elaine Mercer, the Director of Compliance. I'd only seen her twice before, both times in all-hands meetings. She carried herself like someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Jessica, she said, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming on short notice. Her tone was calm, but the folder in front of her was thick. Too thick. The door shut behind me with a soft click. Elaine flipped the folder open. We've concluded the initial review of the documents planted in your desk. You should know, Chloe's actions weren't isolated. They were supported directly or indirectly by her father. I blinked. Mr. Sanders? Yes. Elaine slid a paper across the table. It was an email thread, heavily redacted but clear enough. The anonymous complaint had originated from his account. He had blind copied Chloe. He had coached her on phrasing, even suggested attaching the evidence she had compiled. I felt my stomach twist. So the anonymous report wasn't anonymous at all. Elaine nodded. Exactly. Normally, we encourage employees to raise concerns, but anonymity doesn't mean immunity. Using the process to settle personal scores, that's an abuse of the system. I stared at the page. 6 years I'd worked here. 6 years of clean reviews, loyal clients, late nights making sure nothing slipped through. And my boss had decided his daughter's ambition mattered more than my career. Elaine continued. Here's what happens next. Chloe remains on administrative leave while HR completes a formal review. Her father has been placed on interim suspension pending the outcome. Compliance will recommend escalation to the board. I exhaled slowly, barely believing what I was hearing. She leaned forward. Jessica, your record is clear, more than clear. Client satisfaction scores, system logs, peer feedback, everything points to consistent professional performance. You are not under investigation. Do you understand? For the first time in days, my chest loosened. Yes, I said quietly. Good. Now I need to ask you something. She closed the folder and placed both hands on it. What do you want moving forward? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? My first instinct was simple. To keep my job. To go back to my desk, to my routine, to the safety of normal. but normal was gone. Chloe had made sure of that. I want my work to speak for itself, I said finally. And I don't want to look over my shoulder wondering who's waiting to sabotage me next. Elaine studied me for a moment. Then she nodded. Fair. Back at my desk, the office felt different. People weren't avoiding me anymore. Maria stopped by with a smile that looked more like an apology. Daniel from finance dropped off a file and lingered, asking how I was holding up. The tide had shifted. Chloe's cubicle was empty, her chair pushed in neatly. Her father's office, the corner one with the view, sat dark. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. 2 weeks later, the official announcement went out. Effective immediately, Mr. Sanders has stepped down as department head. Chloe Sanders is no longer employed with the company. The email was short, clinical. But the shockwave rippled through every floor. People whispered in break rooms, speculating about what had really happened. I didn't add to the rumors. I didn't need to. Because the truth was already in the files, in the logs, in the handwriting that wasn't mine. That Friday, Mr. Harrison called me into his office. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but his voice was steady. Jessica, I owe you an apology, he said. I should have protected you sooner. I should have questioned what was happening instead of letting it play out. I let politics cloud my judgment. I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only honest answer. He cleared his throat. The board approved my recommendation. Effective Monday, you'll be promoted to senior account manager, full control of the client portfolio. I blinked. You're serious? He nodded. You earned it long ago. This company needs people who build trust, not tear it down. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the promotion letter in front of me. The city lights shimmered outside my window. I thought about everything. Chloe's whispers, her smug smile, the way she'd leaned against my cubicle with that false confidence. I thought about her father, about the way he'd chosen blood over fairness. And I thought about the compliance officers' faces when the truth surfaced. They hadn't just discovered planted evidence. They'd discovered what envy looks like when it curdles into sabotage. Here's the part no one tells you. Revenge in real life doesn't look like fireworks. It doesn't look like public humiliation or dramatic speeches. It looks like a folder closed quietly on a conference room table. It looks like an empty cubicle on Monday morning. It looks like people realizing, slowly, who you really were all along. I still walk past Chloe's old desk every day. It stays empty, waiting for a new hire. But for me, it's a reminder that no matter how carefully someone plots against you, the truth leaves a trail.